Hello and welcome to the Everything Huskers podcast. Today we have a special guest, Nedu Izuegbunam, coming on the podcast. Nedu, let's just talk about your background here and what you do.
Sounds good. I'm originally from Omaha, Nebraska, currently at the University of Kansas. I will be moving here shortly to work at UNO. Do a lot with sports psychology and mental health. And the biggest part of my job is just helping athletes perform to their full potential, helping them with the mental side of things to help them feel their best to go out there and perform their best.
What inspired you to get into this field?
I initially did journalism and broadcasting in college at the University of Nebraska Lincoln, and I wrote for our paper too, the Daily Nebraskan. And a lot of the athletes I worked with, the stats were cool, but I wanted to know more about them behind the scenes, if they were experiencing the yips or making constant mistakes. I wanted to learn how I can help them get back to their normal selves, but also go from good to great. So I cared more about them as an individual than I did about really their stats.
Yeah, that's really cool to be in this career. But let's get into some techniques. What are the most effective mental skills or techniques you help athletes with?
Some of them might include building confidence and resilience and grit. So when we're down, could be a couple touchdowns or a couple points in tennis, basketball, or runs in baseball. My job all the time that I enjoy is helping them build those skills to help them stay in the game, to not give up. And if there is a time they are down, to help them bounce back quicker than their opponent.
Yeah, studying this, I've really learned that confidence and resilience in the brain is really important.
It absolutely is, Brett. And when you can have that belief that you can do anything and have the focus be on getting better, not so much on can I defeat my opponent or what are they thinking or doing or comparing myself to my teammates or opponents, you notice over time that you're building self mastery, which really is just growing as the performer or as a person overall.
Um, we'll get on to another question. How do you approach building mental toughness in athletes, and what's the process for strengthening resilience?
A great question. So, oftentimes I like to hear the athlete out on what it is that they notice struggling with and wanting to fix. And then before I introduce some skills that can benefit them that have been helpful for past athletes, I like to ask them what has been helpful for you in the past to get through a similar situation. So oftentimes we forget there are things that did work in the past. So just kind of going back to the drawing board and seeing if those tools in the past can be used for now in the present. And then from there, we define what does mental toughness look like, maybe specifically for them, and what they feel they need to do behaviorally to match and increase what they're feeling or wanting to feel mentally. And then was your second question on confidence
Um,
or
uh,
resilience?
like I think you answered both of those actually there.
Okay, cool.
Um, in terms of mindset, what does your role does positive self play in athletes' preparation and performance?
Can you repeat that?
Like, um, what does your positive self talk into athletes help them preparation and performance?
Okay. So are you asking how I maybe support and help them with building positive self-talk?
Yeah,
Okay. Yeah, great question, and you knowing those terms already tells me that you know what you're talking about. That's great. So positive self-talk plays a big role into us believing in ourselves and bouncing back quick from mistakes. So oftentimes we'll come up with a key word or we'll come up with a past phrase or a mantra that can help that athlete stick to the present and remember that they are good enough. So for some people is I can do it. I got this. You've been here before. It could also look like you are a good athlete. You're the best. Sometimes we use clean words. Sometimes we use not so clean words. But at the end of the day, it's a matter of what will help you think best about yourself and reduce the negative thoughts that you have that constantly go into our minds as humans.
Yeah, positivity definitely goes into a good role of playing well as an athlete.
Absolutely. Are you an athlete too?
Yeah, I do a lot of sports. So yeah,
I guess it's better to ask which ones you don't play, huh?
yeah. I guess I don't do soccer, but
That's cool, Brett.
let's get into another topic: mental health, performance, and injury and recovery. My first question is, how do you address issues like performance anxiety, fear of failure, or burnout with athletes?
Performance anxiety, fear of failure, and burnout, you said?
Yeah,
So we'll talk often about the symptoms that they are experiencing. It could be wanting to isolate myself more from my friends, teammates, and family. It could be noticing that their sleep is just trash or their sleeping too much. And that could also be a sign of those things you just talked about. But there's a questionnaire called the GAD-7, which is the Generalized Anxiety Disorder, and it has 7 questions, as well as the PHQ-9, which addresses depression. So oftentimes, if an athlete is experiencing burnout or performance anxiety, we'll talk about them completing this questionnaire to gain more insight on what's going on behind the scenes. Because oftentimes, to answer your question, I guess, is trying to determine what's causing these things, what's causing these feelings, what does it look like for me over maybe the past 2 weeks, and then talking through what would help you to get through that. It could be changing your behavior, changing your outlook on things. It could be changing your environment as well, or just simply taking a break from whatever situation that you're in.
Hmm. Um. Also, to follow up with that, I mean, what does oversleeping look like, and how much like is the recommended amount of sleep for your athletes, or I guess like teenagers like me?
Well, how old are you?
I'm 14,
You're
13,
14. Okay.
14-ish.
So it does look different for depending on the age that you are, the age range. So I would say for your age, I mean, you can get away with 10 plus hours and be okay. I know for athletes, the general recommended, like even 10 hours is good for an athlete, but for an adult, 8 hours is enough. 10 hours for an athlete is often common to suggest as like the top part of that because they need to recover from the rigorous workouts that they're put through. For average students, I should say non athletes, 8 hours will suffice. But generally, you might see 6 to 7 hours among people through this age range because they just have a lot going on. A lot of the time, their days may end at 8, 9, or 10 o'clock because they have training, school, and homework to complete, on top of maybe family and friends that they want to visit and catch up with.
Yeah, that makes more sense to what our hours should be and what athletes' hours should be. Um, how do you help an athlete take care of their mental health but still play at a high level?
Yeah, so oftentimes, if an athlete wants to prioritize that, they may seek to meet with us, and we may meet during the week leading up to one of their games or matches or regattas, and we'll talk through what are some of these things that are distracting us going into this week that we can kind of limit and make sure that we are 100% focused with our performance coming up. So we all the time I like to engage in imagery or visualization. So that's rehearsing mentally what performance you're wanting to have coming up, as well as successfully seeing yourself get through all the distractions that might come up.
Yeah, when I was researching this, I also found that visualization is really good for just how they can perform really good. But with
Absolutely.
yeah, with my last question of this topic, how do you help athletes overcome? Wait. the fear, hesitation when returning to competition after an injury?
Yeah, that's a great question. So it's super easy to get nervous and scared again, or I should say, not easy, but common among people who have been injured, especially if you've had an ACL surgery. You've been out for more than 9 months if you're lucky. Some people, it's more than that. And I think for me, it helped going through an injury like that to really empathize with my athletes who are going through something like that. For pitchers, if it's been a Tommy John surgery, that can be scary coming back from too. So we'll talk about the fears. Let's bring it to the forefront. Let's bring it to the center of the stage and really call out all the emotions attached to it. And then through each session, slowly rewire how we're viewing this injury. Because right now we're only viewing it through the lens of I've been hurt, it was traumatic, I don't want to do it again. But most athletes are confident, competitive, and that's why they stick with their sport. So we talk about what does the characteristics of someone who's competitive look like. So it may be talking about specific action steps that they may engage in at practice, certain moves that they're excited to engage in again, proving to themselves or reminding them, hey, you've done a lot through rehab. What's to tell you that you can't again get to the level that you want? But also in reality, you didn't come this far just to come this far. And oftentimes I notice using that phrase with athletes, it reminds them, okay, even though this process may feel long, I'm achieving something every step of the way and getting closer and closer to being back out there and playing the game I love.
Yeah, that sounds really important.
And a lot of the skills you asked before too are a part of that, right? So talking about what is your self-talk, what self-talk is getting in the way of you believing you can be out there again and be healthy. And also what, like you mentioned and we mentioned before, the visualization piece. If I can see myself getting back out there and doing it or watching old tape of me, oftentimes that gets the athlete feeling good about doing it again.
Yeah, I feel like if they just watch or like know how they have performed with stats or I guess video, they might just have more confidence in themselves that can get them through injury and more not have fear during a game.
Absolutely. Had you ever suffered an injury before, Brett?
Yeah, I broke my leg in fifth grade football.
I'm sure that was very, very painful. Do you remember how you got back into playing football again?
Um, I guess not. I don't know. I just had confidence in myself, but
Hey, that's a good enough answer for me. I'm
yeah,
just it's just good to hear that you're back playing.
yeah. Uh, Topic three: what's goal setting, performance, and measuring progress and success? My first question is: how do you help athletes that set goals that push them but aren't too crazy, and how do you keep them motivated along the way?
So for that first part, sounds like you're basically asking how do we set goals that are realistic.
Yes.
So we talk about I use a lot of rating scales and address what number would you attach being able to do this skill and actually meeting this goal. And if we feel like it's too easy, we may add another level to it. Or if we feel it's too hard, we may put them down to a place where they actually know that they can do this. And by me realizing it's real is by them sharing examples of either pastimes or um, setting up specific ways that they can address this. So that leads into your second question, which is I think you asked how do we keep them motivated to achieving that goal?
Yeah.
So oftentimes we may again ask them to rate their confidence in meeting this goal. And if it's increasing, that's a good sign that they are getting closer. If it's decreasing, then maybe we have to go back to the drawing board and, like your first question asked, make it more realistic or take something away. Because oftentimes, if you're trying to build confidence, you want to do things that you're seeing yourself able to achieve. So the rating scale helps them stay motivated, talking about steps specifically that they've addressed to reach that goal helps them stay motivated. So we might create a short-term goal or short-term goals and that establish the process of meeting that long-term goal. So if your goal is to hit 10 free throws in a row by the end of the summer, we may have you practice that, whether it be weekly, daily, and just maybe hitting a couple in a row first to help build that confidence and belief that you can do it by the time you want to.
Yeah, I guess how big of a role does honesty play in that? Because, I mean, how do you know if athletes are really being honest about how their fear is like when they rate it?
Because if they are getting closer to their goal, you'll know that they're telling the truth. If they're not, but they're saying that they feel like a 9 or 10, I mean, like the old saying is numbers don't lie. So if someone is lying about their rating, but their proof is them not playing as much, or their stats aren't showing that, then it's pretty obvious. So one thing I always show when I meet with an athlete, we talk about honesty and how I can't help you unless you're giving me the real picture, because then we're working with something fake, and it's hard to work with something fake if you're serious about reaching a goal. So that's the long way of answering your question, but basically just calling it out and being like, hey, are you sure that this is the truth? Because if it is, okay, but I don't get how it is if we're not meeting that goal. If it's not the truth and we talk about, okay, that's totally fine. Let's set a new goal that makes this more plausible for you to achieve.
Yeah. Well, anyway, I guess it's great to teach people about this stuff, and I think confidence plays a really big role in like all physicality of like the brain and all of everything, and positivity. Yeah, that plays a big role also.
Absolutely. Yeah, I think you've asked some great questions, and it's great to know that there's people outside the field that recognize the value and mental skills training. So kudos to you, Brett.
Yep. Thank you for coming on here. Hope everyone learns a lot about the brain through this video.
Me too. Thank you, Brett.
Let's thank Nedu for coming on here in the comment section. This was a great video, and I hope everyone can learn something. Go Big Red, and we'll see you in the next one.